can only imagine when that day comes.
Good morning, everybody. There's a few less than 1,000 here, but that's all right. One thing I try real hard not to do is fuss about who isn't here to the people who got up and came, because I figure they don't want to hear it. If I were sitting in the other seat, I'd think, well, what I look like, a potted plant, And so, but we're delighted that you're here today. We're look at the end of Psalm 101, then going to Psalm 102, very different feel to it in terms of what's being dealt with. Let's have a word of prayer as we begin. Our Father, we give thee thanks for this new day. It's the Lord's day. For that, we're grateful. We're grateful always for the sacrifice that he made in our behest. We pray that you would help us to be like him and to be serious when we pray that prayer. Because to be like him, we know means undergoing some of the same kinds of things and difficult decisions and all that he did is to be expected. We pray that you would strengthen us in every righteous resolve, that you'll be with us in this study and later in the worship. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. This psalm, remember, was the resolve of a righteous heart. It's one I really think is a great psalm. And he begins chapter 101, verse 1, and the first part of verse 2, I'm going to sing. And then the next portion is verses 6 through 5, or verses 6 through 5, or 2b, what am I saying? 2b through 5. I will walk with integrity. And he makes that resolve. I'm not going to talk about doing it, I'm going to do it. And then finally, I will encourage the faithful, verses 106, where we got to there. Well, the true final part of it is this individual, apparently the king, says, I will remove evil. Verses 7 and 8. He who practices deceit shall not dwell within my house. He who speaks falsehood shall not maintain his position before me. Every morning I will destroy all the wicked of the land, so as to cut off from the city of the Lord all those who do iniquity. Now, these last two verses of the psalm concern the king's plans for dealing with the wicked. And when he finds them guilty in cases that are brought before his court, he aspires to be a just judge. And that's the best you can ask for, isn't it? It's just a just judge. We've come to a time where people are somehow think it is just unduly mean and cruel to impose penalty when an individual harms his neighbor, steals from his neighbor, assaults his wife, on and on and on, that somehow that we're not supposed to do that. And I think everybody here is old enough and mature enough to know that if there's not some penalty attached to that kind of thing, what's it going to do? It's going to get worse. I grew up around gangbangers and outlaws. And I can tell you, if there's not a restraining force, they will, as the old King James Bible says, wax worse and worse and worse. That's what they'll do. And I remember growing up, I don't know, I won't say on film what I think, but I'll just say this, the gambling trade and all that was better run by those style thugs than it is now wide open and deleterious to the community, any community where it is. And I've mentioned it several times lately because on my mind I see that silly commercial about, the schools need money and this and that and what have you. We don't need to sustain ourselves extorting and deceiving and taking money off our neighbors who ought to be spending that money on buying groceries and buying their clothes and kids and grandkids' clothes and that kind of thing. And we look at it, we look at what we already have, And we know that it hasn't produced some sort of economic windfall. You know, our children in Polk County, because of the degree of poverty, are still all subject to have free breakfast and free lunch, which I'm fine with that. But I'm just saying it's not a wealthy area. Well, where'd all that money go? In the current gambling hall. Where'd that money go? I think I know probably where some of it goes. In fact, I'm sure of it. Well, this king says, deceitful, treacherous, lying people will not be welcome in his circle of life. He who practices deceit, he says, shall not dwell in my house. Period. Full stop. And deceit is a translation of a word that depicts a person who has become slack telling the truth, a person who has a dubious relationship with the truth, a person who will lie looking at you. He is a man who resorts to treachery. He will resort to fraud in order to achieve his goals. One of our new neighbor wanted to have some gutters put on her house, and got in touch with us. Said, "Do you know anybody?" Well, I didn't, but I got in touch with a local contractor that I do know, and he said, "Well, this is who I use on all my jobs," and I gave her that. See, so there, you want to weed out all those guys out there. You can get some cards printed that say anything, can't you? And advertise yourself as that. But there are people that are just as honest as the day is long, and then there are those who are not. And this king says, I'm going to get rid of the ones that are not. They're not going to stay here. And if he says, this man, if the king discovers him as such a part in his service, he's going to remove him. And he's going to replace him with somebody who conducts himself with integrity. The second line is part of a synonymous parallel. That is, it's the same thing basically said with different phraseology to strengthen it. Common feature of Hebrew poetry. And he says, he who speaks falsehood shall not maintain his position before me. Deceiver, dishonest, speaks falsehood, different words, same kind of thing. And I'm not going to have it. And the one who speaks lies or falsehood will not be tolerated in the king's court. Doesn't need that person. Any kind of officer like that, particularly a political officer, needs to have somebody or maybe a couple of somebodies on his staff or her staff that can walk in there and close the door behind them and say, we got to talk. Boss, we got to talk. And him be willing to accept that. I may have told you before, I'm going to tell you again. If it didn't, when Korea cranked up, they pulled my dad back over there. They got into that gunfight without enough medical personnel, so they sent him a letter and said, congratulations. And so he got an all-expense paid trip to Korea. It was a tough place. The environment's tough and all of that. But he said there was a first lieutenant that was over him and kind of over the operational thing at this MASH hospital. And he called him in there and said, he was a smart kid. He said, Sergeant, look, I don't have a clue how to run a hospital. So I want you to help me because I know you do know. And so he said, 90 days he was up and running. He didn't need a lot of help, but he would listen. So there was a few times I go in there and ask, can I speak freely? Yes, sir. Yeah, sorry, sure. Go ahead. What's up? Well, that's what the king needs. That's what leaders need, political officers in any country. They need somebody around them that will and can tell them the truth without him going crazy or, overreacting and what have you. But you need that. Reprehensible conduct, like this person's done, however, he said, deserves only disgrace and expulsion from places of influence. The king's going to pursue integrity. He's going to target that. He's going to pursue integrity both negatively and positively. As one in a position of influence, he's going to take the necessary steps to purge the land of both public and private devotion to wickedness. Now, when you step out there and do that, how do people react? Do they always say, boy, thanks for pointing those things out? We've been needing to deal with that a long time. Is that how they react? No, because they got their hand in the cookie jar. And when I said, where's that money go? Well, it goes in the pocket of officials that are crooked. It's where it goes. United States, for example, if you get up on the national level, certainly Texas, same thing. They don't have an income problem. They got a spending problem. That's the problem. And, I have to operate this way, and I bet you do too. If I don't have the money, I don't buy it. I just don't buy it. What the government's bad about doing is we don't have the money. Hey, no problem. We got this printing press over here. We just print up some. And so somebody comes along and says, well, boss, look, but there's nothing backing that. He says, well, who cares? They don't, the public don't understand that. And so that's what inflation is. Inflation is not some mysterious thing. Inflation occurs whenever those people are given the order to print money that there's nothing behind. Who can do that? Who can legally do it, so I should say? The government. The government's the only one that can do that. Now, anybody else does it. If me and Dallas get us a really fine printer out here and we start printing off your brand new, crisp $100 bills, well, they're going to call us. Counterfeiters, outlaws say, well, if I can't do it, should the government that's supposed to represent me do that? Well, nobody should do it because it's wrong. But this king, he's going to step in, and this is a man of integrity. And he says, of course, the king had to kind of pull that leaders don't have today because what he said went. And so this position of influence, he's going to use to take the necessary steps to purge the land. And, if people kick against it too long, he'll deal with them. In verse 8, in ancient courts, cases were generally brought before the king. He was the top guy. They're brought before the king early in the day. That's illustrated in 2 Samuel 15 in verse 2. And the writer here vows that each morning, apparently when he conducts public trials, that he's going to be prompt and he's going to be swift in bringing punishment, just punishment, against those that he finds guilty of wrongdoing. Now, not everybody that's charged is guilty. And so that's another thing. You can react off out here in extremism. Not everybody that gets charged with something is guilty. There are mistakes that are made. That's why on Capitol here in this part of the world, where the death penalty is involved, the cops work it up initially. They present it to the DA's office. They're supposed to go through and look at all the facts there, and then they decide to bring charges or not, or they present it to a grand jury, and the grand jury decides if there's an indictment is called for. Then they go to trial. And you got the defense and you got the prosecution representing the state. And if a person is found guilty of that and sentenced to death, then they're going to do the whole thing over the second time. Why? Well, because you don't want to execute somebody that's innocent. Now, we've had a number of people that DNA evidence has proven innocent, sitting on death row. And of course, to the credit, when that's been proven, there have been a number of cases where somebody that was sitting there for years, but they cut them loose, and gave them compensation to make up for all that time. The life was disrupted. You can't pay back from that. Need to try to get it right. Of course, now we have a lot better methods of determining guilt or innocence. And as that's come online, it's at least potentially made it a lot better system than what that it was before. But this, he says, I will destroy the wicked of the land. And the literal Hebrew is to the mornings, translated every morning or from morning to morning or something like that. So the king says with vigor and devotion, characterizes destroying all the wicked. Each morning, he's going to disrupt this thing. He will give himself to upholding the cause of justice in his domain. And so as to cut off from the city of the Lord all those who do iniquity, he resolves that he's going to forcefully cut off or forcefully remove those who do evil from the city. In other words, if you're going to be in the city, you're going to have to behave yourself. I was in a city-state several years ago and went to Singapore. And that's the way they are. And it's really a free and open society, but in Singapore, the rules are the rules. And they don't get loud and they don't holler and hoot and put on a big brouhaha. But I've told you before, it's a sobering thing. You get a card, and in capital letters, all caps, in red ink, it used to say, I don't know what it does now, drug smuggling is punishable by death in this republic. And you sign that and date it. And in my case, it came through in a tall, nice-looking Chinese man wearing a really nice suit, said, Sir, did you read this before you signed it? And I said, yes, I did. And he smiled and said, very well. Put it in my passport. Said, have a nice stay. And which is Chinese for you better not get caught smuggling no dope in Singapore. And but I've never felt safer in an urban environment in my life than there. But one of the brethren told me, said, a lot of that, yes, said, we got pretty stringent police and what have you. But he said, Brother Mitchell, the people here won't accept crime. Said that if, living in a city-state like this, everybody, if something happens, somebody saw it. And so as soon as the cops roll in, they're going to say, and I'll testify to it in court. And there'll be 2 or 3 people, 3 or 4, maybe a number of people. And so he said, that's the difference. And so we as a people have to decide we're going to be not going to be tolerant of just brazen violations of the law. And then you have to be fair in the distribution of that. It should be just as fair for you as it is for me. When you start having disproportionate numbers show up and folks that are, being arrested and tried, it could be that they're just got a problem in their community, or it could be bias, and you want to try to do everything you can to factor that out. Being God's representative, this king, in God's holy city, and leading his chosen nation, places a heavy burden on the king, doesn't it? Because the Lord is going to hold him accountable. And the obligation he possesses, as his song reflects, can only be fulfilled with a holy and a righteous life. That's a prerequisite. That's necessary. All of us have responsibilities. We together. There's just a few of us here today, so we've got a lot of people sleeping in or whatever they're doing. They're not here. Well, if I make covenant with the Lord, aren't I obligated to do my best to fulfill that covenant? And is being gathered with the saints when they assemble to worship the Lord, isn't that part of that? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, because I thought it was all my life. That's why, when I was a kid, Daddy said, get in there and shine your shoes. We're going to worship tomorrow. You got your Bible lesson done, and so you rather do it yourself than have him help you, because he demanded absolutely the correct answer. The teacher would fudge a little bit, and what have you. But he and I actually got along real well. I followed him like a little puppy, and I wanted to be where he was always. So you're just lucky to have had that. But we're coming down to 102. And this individual, the psalmist, is in a terrible state. And what in the world is he going to do? I mean, it's just everything's going wrong. Well, he turns to the Lord, lays it before the Lord. What do you think about that? See, that's right. It's what we need to do. And in a lot of those cases, that's all we can do. Where there is no remedy, maybe not a legal remedy, maybe not a medical remedy or whatever. But all we can do is we put it before him. And what does he tell us? He tells us, trust me. Trust me. He didn't run out on Jesus when he allowed Jesus to go to the cross, did he? He didn't run out on him. He came here to go to the cross. He knew what the mission was, and he allowed it to happen. Why in the world would he do something like that? Yeah, Jesus was the hope of the world, wasn't he? If he didn't go through with it, I mean, all of humanity. It's hard to get that said in a way that impacts people like it is, but I mean, the whole human family's fate depended on Jesus walking out of the Garden of Gethsemane resolved and allowing himself to be arrested and mistreated and ultimately executed for no crime in order to pay the sin debt that's owed by whom? Us. Now, do you think that one that would do that for you should command our absolute, unwavering loyalty? I've known a lot of military guys and that had officers and what have you that they admired, and I mean, they'd have walked through torment behind some of those people. They had that much love and respect for them. Well, how much love and respect do we have for the Lord? That shows in the decisions that we make relative to his people, his church, his mission. We can talk all day, you can talk a good game, but now talking and doing are different things. And this sufferer is described as faint, at the point of just being overcome by the trials that he's facing. And in his desperation, he pours out or turns his heart over as if he were spilling it all out before the Lord. Total contents of his mind, nothing held back, are brought before the Lord so he can observe what he's dealing with and respond in his mercy to his servant. And the prayer is labeled a complaint or the voicing of a deeply troubling concern. I like that better. A complaint in one sense, but it's not just like one of these whining, poor old pitiful me. Nobody loves me, everybody hates me. Think I'll eat a worm? You remember that one? And so he doesn't go there. It's not that kind of thing. But he's just got something he can't handle, and he's going to turn it over to the Lord. He's voicing how deeply troubling it is to him. And the text of this lament prayer contains evidence of being written in a later Old Testament period. Verses 13 through 16, along with verses 21 and 22, point toward the end of the exile. And verses 13 and 14 not only portray Zion, Mount Zion, Jerusalem, is laying in ruins, but they also seem to anticipate the coming of the restoration. And perhaps the writer is expecting the fulfillment of Jeremiah's prophecies that foretold the captivity would last for a period of 70 years. You can see that in Jeremiah 25 and verse 11, 12, Jeremiah 29 and verse 10. And the the psalmist may have been counting up the years even as Daniel did. You remember what Daniel said. He said, I, Daniel, observed in the books the number of the years which was revealed as the word of the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet for the completion of the desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. That's Daniel chapter 9, verse 2, a latter part of that verse. So apparently, this psalm is a prayer of a suffering child of the Lord who is mourning over the fall of his nation. You know, people can't hardly get their mind around the idea that this nation could fall. But it can. There have been lots of great world empires that fell. The Chaldeans, the Babylonians that imposed this exile on God's people for 70 years, they were here and gone. The Assyrians that took the 10 northern tribes into captivity, they're here and gone. The mighty Roman Empire that people go from all over the world to see the relics sitting around of things that they built, the engineering marvels that they left behind. Now, I've told you before, my father-in-law said that we moved the heaviest armor that the United States had in its arsenal at that time on some roads that were built by the Romans, stone roads. He said, heavy tanks. And we're still useful and still able to move our equipment and what have you on that. That's, 2,000-year-old road. I'm pretty sure that there's not a road in Polk County that'll last 1,000 years. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's not one that'll last 100 years without maintenance and what have you. We just don't put that kind of in it, but the Romans did. And they were the hegemon. I mean, they were the big dog. Where are they today? Where's that old Roman Empire? It's in ruin. Absolutely in ruin. God told him he would destroy it, and he did destroy it. And so this person has experienced what we hope we never do. But that example is there for a reason. It stands as a warning. And this man's, his oneness with his nation brings an undeniable, unbearable pain to his heart. And although the psalm is usually accorded a place in the list of the 7 penitential psalms, Psalm 6, Psalm 32, Psalm 38, Psalm 51, Psalm 102, 130, and 143 is the way some count it. But the writer here describes the situation that's befallen him, and he doesn't detail a bunch of reasons for it. And his pleas seem to imply that the captivity has come as a chastisement from the Lord because of the waywardness of his people. I mean, they had the prophet Jeremiah, we're going to see this morning, that they weren't very nice to him. I mean, he told them, and told him, and told him he told them. And they were, in fact, they wanted to kill him. There was elements that wanted to just get rid of him. I mean, he's being negative. Well, sometimes things are negative. You know, we love to think about positive things, but sometimes the realities that we have to deal with are not positive. So what do you do then? Well, you just buckle up and meet it. You try to meet the challenge. You do what you have to do, and you trust God. The prayer here falls into 3 parts. In verses 1 through 11, he describes the stressful condition that he's dealing with. Secondly, in verses 12 through 22, he expresses his expectant prayer for God to restore Zion. And the third, verses 23 through 28, compares his frailty to the eternal nature of God. He's asking for help. He acknowledges God's eternal and from everlasting to everlasting, but he's not. He needs God to help him. And so it addresses the question of what hope do the afflicted have? To say it another way, it is asking from what sources can the discouraged draw comfort. Let's look at verses 1 and 2. Hear my prayer. Hear my prayer, O Lord, and let my cry for help come to you. Do not hide your face from me in the days of my distress. Incline your ear to me. In the day when I call, answer me quickly. He's in distress, and he is not hesitant to come very close to ordering God. I don't think he meant that. I don't think God took it that way, but if you just listen to the words. So it's an intense two verses appealing to God to hear what he's going to say. Hear my prayer, O Lord, and let my cry for help come to you. So the afflicted man should be true with all afflicted people. He lifts up his heart in prayer in order to lay his burden before his God. And he knows that God is the source of strength during this time of heaviness. And the implication is that a measure of relief is found in explaining what's going on and how it's hitting you to a compassionate God. Do you ever, I think women are better at this than men are. Men are trained to, all right, well, what's the reality? What do we need to do to fix it? I think, I don't want to offend anybody. If I do, I'm sure you'll tell me. No, you don't. You're usually pretty nice about not. But ladies sometimes, and guys too, you don't tell anybody I said that, profit from just having a listening ear where they're not asking you to solve anything, but just let them talk. And, they teach you that in counseling courses a lot of time. If you get still and quiet and just let people, they'll get it all out there. And sometimes that's helpful to folks. And so the descriptive address, "O Lord," is usually found in context of fervency and urgency, and that's certainly what this is. And so he's uttering a cry for help. The English translation is from only one word in Hebrew. It is a very intense word, and it denotes calling out for assistance in the abyss of terrible pain. And his one word, plaintive, plea, has been translated by 5 English words by the New American Standard. Let my cry for help, come before you. He's insisting that his prayer for divine intervention be heard and be answered. He's hoping God's going to answer it like he wants to, but he doesn't try to order God to answer it like he wants to, does he? He just, please hear me and please respond. And so he prays in verse 2, he prays with an earnestness that borders on commanding God. He pleads, do not hide your face from me in the day of my distress. Incline your ear to me. In the day I call, answer me quickly. Lord, I need your help. In a 3-line synonymous parallel, he begs for God to listen to his supplication and to answer him without any hesitation whatsoever. And can we do that? Somebody please say, well, yeah, we can do that. But, that's not being disrespectful to just be honest. Lord, this is what's on me, and I'm about to lose my grip. I need your help. I need you to hear me. We can do that. In fact, where to whom would you go with that other than the Lord? He's the one that can do something about it. We get in those situations sometimes where our family can't help if they wanted to. And our friends in the community, whatever, they can't do anything about it. no matter how they may want to. And so we take those things to the Lord. And that's exactly where he goes. And in the entreaty, he makes 5 specific appeals. He pleads that God would hear him and respond to his petition. And he issues a cry for help, asking God to let the appeal come before him and be heard. And he urges the Lord not to hide his face from him, not to be disinterested and turn his face away from his servant. His supplicants, he supplicates rather God to incline his ear toward him. Just catch every word that he's saying. You know, that catching every word is kind of getting to be for me a memory. And you have to be careful. I've noticed that. Sometimes old people will respond inappropriately, and I've discovered a lot of times it's because they didn't hear what they thought they heard. So just all of us that have white hair, before you go off like a rocket, make sure you heard what you think you heard. Particularly when you're in the bank or in the grocery store line or somewhere out in public. Try to make sure that you heard what you thought you heard and respond appropriately. And so he directs God almost, please answer me quickly. And it's not because he thinks he's all that, it's because he thinks he's about to lose. He's about to lose his grip. I've been all I can stand, and I can't stand anymore. The expressions are different, poetic ways of intensifying the overall petition. Please hear me, and please respond quickly. That's the overall thing he's doing in all of that. But as he hits it, boom, 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 3 times, same thing said basically 3 different ways, that's intensification. The day that he will call, though expressed as an indefinite day in the future, is a figurative way for him to refer to what is going on in that current moment. He pictures his plight as the day of distress, and this is a word for anguish of being in bitter strait. And intensely and emotionally, he is fervently asking for God to listen and respond to him immediately. God doesn't always answer yes, but he always answers and says, trust me. I think of people that I have with desperate family members begged the Lord to preserve longer. And the answer was, can't be. That's hard to take. But he knows what's best. And what he does is always what's best. The day that he will call, like I say, expressed as indefinite, but he's talking about whatever it is that he's facing. He describes the days of pain in verses 3 through 7. We're at Psalm 102. For my days have been consumed in smoke, and my bones have been scorched like a hearth. My heart has been smitten like grass and has withered away. Indeed, I forgot to eat my bread because of the loudness of my groaning. My bones cling to my flesh. I resemble a pelican of the wilderness. I have become like an owl of the waste places. I lie awake. I have become like a lonely bird on a housetop. He's familiar with the wildlife of the area. In verse 3, after he implores God to hear him, he proceeds to describe in some detail the miserable conditions this tragedy has brought to him and imposed on him. And as part of this, he may be taking personally what's happening to his nation. When a nation becomes so corrupt that God decides to remove it, well, do all the righteous people just Does he just put all them over here under a protective bubble and they don't have to experience it? No. And some of that is, well, you of all people, maybe he's the Lord's thinking, ought to have spoken up and insisted that whatever it was wrong stops. Maybe you should, and maybe this is the fall of the nation, but what did you do? Which a lot of times nation states do things that we can't really effectively respond to. But as we can and where we can, we need to be a voice for good and a source of light in a dark place. He's taken possibly personally what's going on. I think anybody would. In addition, he must also be suffering physically and emotionally from either this or some other trial. And so in highly figurative descriptions with metaphors and hyperboles, he pictures the desolation of his nation and his own personal problems through the anguish and pain of his spirit and his body. For my days have been consumed in smoke. We just had some of that here recently, didn't we? Right there in San Jacinto and Montgomery County. That smoke billowing out of there. We're so fortunate and ought to thank God that all our neighbors got out of there. And there, as far as I know, no serious injury. Lost one structure. We were smiled on. Our expression, that experience took years off of my life. That's similar to what he's saying here. That whatever that experience was, put white hair on my head or whatever. We talk in those terms. And my bones have been scorched like a hearth. You ever been in an old house and looked in the hearth? What does it look like? Looked like it had a fire in there, doesn't it? I mean, it's scorched. And so my bones have been scorched like a hearth. So deep is his pain that he says it's as if his bones have been burned the way a hearth is burned with fire, illustrating intense fever perhaps or dissolution of some kind. And the word is a rare word and has been variously translated. The King James and the New American Standard, they translate it hearth. The American Standard translates it as firebrand. The NIV translates it glowing embers, and the New English Bible translates it as oven. Well, all of it, it's kind of all basically the same thing. Use different terminology. His spirit is blackened with soot and heat from the flames of his trial. He's seared as a fireplace might be seared, scorched from the leaping flames in it. So his fear, verse 4, his spirit fails within him. He says, my heart has been smitten like grass and has withered away. The heart, the center of emotions and thoughts, he says, is sick. It is as if it was smitten by something, like grass being destroyed by the sun as it withers and dies under the scorching heat. East Texas has scorching heat, doesn't it? And, I usually, and all of us go through a period where you have to mow too often as far as I'm concerned. I got about one time a week in me, and I got other stuff I got to do, but that stuff just keeps going up there mocking you until the West Texas sun hits it. And then what happens? That grass turns brown, and you walk on it and it's crunch, crunch, crunch. So we can get our mind around that. We in the same kind of place and have experienced that. And he thinks of his condition as being like a curse that's been pronounced upon him, causing him to waste away. Indeed, he says, I forgot to eat my bread. Overwhelmed by sorrow, his food has no appeal to him. And at times he is so caught up in his sorrow that he has no thought of eating. I remember one of my professors at Fred Hardeman, we were talking about fasting, and Jesus said you could do it or not do it. It was a custom of his time. But he said, don't make a show of it. And I remember Dr. Flatt suggested that fasting is a thing that comes naturally with people that are doing a death watch over somebody they love or something like that, that they don't even think about eating. You know, we've done that before, just gone out with some food and sit people down at the table, and then they start eating and say, oh, I had forgotten how hungry I am. I don't know how it was for you, but when I had COVID and I had a light case, I didn't want to eat. I just didn't want to eat. I didn't eat much. And I knew I was getting better when I started eating like I normally do. But he's in this situation, and he's been smitten like the grass that withers away. Indeed, I forgot to eat my bread. He's overwhelmed by sorrow. So he hadn't even thought about hunger pains. Verse 5, in his state of weakness, it appears to the psalmist that his bones are cleaving to his skin. You know, when people are really, really sick, do you ever notice that they lose weight? I don't care what you got. If it's very serious, a lot of times people will lose enough weight to notice. And some of them lose a lot. Because of the loudness of my groaning, my bones cling to my flesh. You know, he's groaned so long and so loud that his strength is gone. He's just cried till he can't anymore. And he has become, to picture it with poetic exaggeration, just a skeleton covered by skin, or maybe not. Maybe that pretty much gets what he's like. His flesh has dried up from a lack of nourishment and proper care, and he's nothing but skin and bones, as we would say. In verse 6, affliction and loneliness often go together, and such is his experience. He's living a harsh life, a lonely life, a miserable life, as one lives in the wilderness and the waste places. You know, there are very few of us that have the requisite skills to make it just in the wilderness. And I think I could get along several days, but I don't want to. That's just not a fun way to live, not an encouraging way to live, nothing about it. It's tough. And so affliction and loneliness go together. That's his experience. And he said, I resemble a pelican of the wilderness. Now, I don't know the pelicans I know anything about. In other words, he's talking about a different bird than what I know something about, because they're very social and what have you. But this bird lives in the wilderness, in the waste places, and he lives in solitude in forsaken places, and perhaps utters strange, mournful cries there. And the bird's habitat and his character provide, the psalmist is moved to use as an illustration of what he's going through. He said, I've become like an owl of the waste places. He's like this desert owl, because this bird who also lives in barren, deserted places. And he may be stressing that the conditions of his own life with that. He lives and sleeps in the midst of broken places. His country's been torn apart. Amidst the debris of his ruined city. You think about Russia, and you think about the other place. And man, I wouldn't even try to make a guess at how long it's going to take to rebuild that. You know, very historic old buildings and what have you, beautiful, beautiful things, just torn asunder. Psalmist's situation is like that. And both the terms pelican and owl are listed among the unclean birds in Leviticus 11, 17, and 18. That might be why he chose that. Lord willing, we'll begin there next week. I thank you for being here.